Hi, and welcome to Gartner Live. I'm Mary Mesaglio, Managing Vice President with the CEO and Digital Futures team. And I am lucky to be joined by Daryl Plummer, VP, Distinguished Analyst, and Gartner Fellow. Hello, Daryl.
Hello, how are you doing?
I am well, and today we are going to be discussing the upcoming Gartner IT Symposium Expo and some of the big themes for this year's conference. If the topics we discuss today are of interest to you, be sure to check out Gartner IT Symposium Expo, which is taking place later this year. And you can learn more about Gartner IT Symposium Expo in the description of this post. So first of all, I have to say it's kind of cool to be interviewing you about big themes and the opening analyst keynote, Daryl, because I don't know if our viewers know this, but my very, very first keynote ever on stage in Cannes in France was with you. And I felt like I was totally unfairly treated because they made me go up right after your segment. And I just thought that is crazy to go up after Daryl Plummer. Do you remember that?
I do remember that, and it's very sweet of you to say. I actually usually tell people the same thing about you.
And that was in 2008, I think. That was my first keynote. How many, you might not know this off the top of your heads, but how many Gartner opening analyst keynotes do you think you've done at Symposium?
Oh wow. Let's see. This is my 26th symposium, I believe, and I've done probably 15 or 16 keynotes. That's a guess. It's a wild guess, but if it's less than that, I'd be shocked.
Yes, you are a giant of Gartner and a giant of research and advisory. So really cool to be having this conversation. What about this year's keynote? Can you give us a little bit of a sneak preview? I know it's still absolutely in progress and a lot's going to happen between now and Symposium to develop the themes, but give us a sneak preview of what are some of the big things that you guys are discussing.
Well, one thing I can tell you about this keynote is hard. In this new age of dealing with different work scenarios and planning scenarios. It's very difficult to come to a message that people won't just say, "Hey, there's nothing new there," or "Hey, that's too far out. I can't do that." And that's always a challenge. But it seems more now because there's so much uncertainty about what's going to happen and where we're all going. And that's the theme of the keynote, is the idea of where next, where is next. And you could think, why not what next? What's next? Well, yeah, there's always a what next involved. But the notion of where you'll go next is really brought about by this idea that we've all had to change our where personally and in business terms. We've all been sent home to work, and we've got to decide whether we're going to go back, and we've got all these issues surrounding how to work with other people who are not where we expected them to be. That's where it starts, but then it jumps off into the notion of where next in a whole bunch of different ways, in terms of where you're going to get talent, where are you going to get your solutions from, where your best customer is going to be found, and so forth. So that's sort of where we're headed now, is this concept of where next.
And so in this concept of where next, and without trying to put you on the spot and give away all the goods, I would love to know what is the where next for the future of work, and not just in terms of whether people are going back to a physical office or not, hard returns or soft returns or no returns, but what's Gartner saying, or what's Gartner going to be saying in the big theme of Symposium and in the keynote regarding advice for people listening going, I don't know how we're supposed to manage this. What is the future of work going to look like? Is there anything we can hang on to in all this disruption that actually is going to remain true? Anything you would say?
Yeah. Remember I said it was hard, and you just illustrated why it's hard. It was because when you ask the question, where next, people expect you to answer, okay, tell me, where next? And the problem with that is everybody's got a different where next. Everybody's got to figure out how to find their where next in the most effective and efficient way. The best thing we can do is give you a framework for thinking through how to find your where next. For instance, we talked about this whole thing about people working at home now. We're all talking about the idea that now some employees are saying, I'll quit if you make me go back to the office. And so companies are thinking, oh no, there's our where next. We're gonna have to have more employees that are working in a hybrid mode or working at home than we've ever had before. So let's drop all of our property leases and have smaller building space and so forth. But guess what? At the same time, we're finding that a younger generation is struggling with having to work remotely. In virtual learning, in the transition to virtual learning, young people have lost like 1.4% in their success rates in classes. In other words, they're failing courses 1.4% more than they were before the transition to virtual. They're lowering their completion rates on assignments. They're not getting work done. And they're desperate for that social contact. My daughter is one that she wakes up in the morning. Well, she wakes up about 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and because she stayed up all night talking to her friends, she dials into a conference call with all of her friends. They leave the phone connected for the rest of the day. No matter what else they're doing, the phone is just sitting there. Whether they're talking or not, they're just connecting. These people may want to go back to the office when they get old enough to work. They may say, look, and she's 13 now, so she's got a little ways to go, but when they may say, look, this whole business of being remote doesn't work for me. So we're trying to give a framework for how each customer finds their where next. Do you prepare for everyone being in a hybrid mode, or do you prepare for that next generation that's going to say, nope, I want to be sitting right next to the people that I talk to and work with?
So if I'm hearing you correctly, I know there's really big generational differences between, say, older generations who are pretty comfortable largely working at home, but say millennials going, this is my social life. Like the office is where I might meet my next partner or my future partner or partners or whatever. And so really different expectations. So if you're a leader out there, what are some of the challenges that leaders are facing in managing this pandemic, the ambiguity, the uncertainty? It's kind of unending. What are some of the challenges they're facing, in your opinion?
Well, yeah, the first challenge is right in what you just said, this ambiguity, this uncertainty. We love managing to stability. We love managing to a situation where we can set things in place and let them run, make them more efficient, tweak them and optimize them. The biggest challenges for leaders has been for years that now it's more important to build systems and processes that can change than it is to build ones that last for a long time. Because that lasting for a long time is sort of getting harder and harder. You're going to have to confront change. The change that's happening now, though, is it's like the disruptions used to come like a big rock hitting a lake and causing a splash and what ripples radiate out over the lake, but it would go back to being a normal lake after that, even if the shoreline was changed. Now it's like being in the ocean. Giant waves pushing you back and forth, and every wave pushes the other waves. So it never ends. Now we're talking about leadership being the issue of how to build resilience in everything you do, how to be able to flex and bend with the wind as well as with the waves, and then to snap back to be able to bend again. Now, not to snap back to where you were before necessarily, because trees seldom go back to exactly where they were before. They kind of sway, and even tall buildings are designed to sway. And when I first found that out, I was afraid to go to the top of the Chrysler building anymore. But this idea of being able to sway with the flow of the waves or the flow of the wind is the biggest challenge. How do you set up an organization that can do that? How do you set up an ecosystem of partners that are ready to do that? And it's realized in things like changing your supply chains, your replenishment strategies. It's realized in things like being able to meet your customers where they are, and also being able to help your employees to feel like they're contributing to the company and the company is contributing to them. Because all of these things have to work in concert now. If they're all out of shape with one another or they're off sync, your ship's going to sink. And it's not going to keep floating.
I want to say that, your metaphor you're in waves and you're going back and forth and there's just more waves. It's not like a big rock that just has all these ripple effects in a calm lake. It's more like waves that keep coming. So, I remember that. I remember I live near the Mediterranean, and this, when the big waves come in and you get up and you take a deep breath of oxygen, you think you're done, and then it hits you in the face and you knock back down and you didn't exactly sway, right? So I feel like this is kind of sucks, a little bit for leaders. Like we're supposed to do that, but it's not that great to be changing all the time and for the sands to be shifting beneath the feet all the time. Are there principles that they can be led by, or anything you look and go, Gartner believes this is probably going to remain true. No matter what else happens, this you can hold on to. Maybe that's an unfair question, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I would say that first principle, that change will continue to change. The nature of change itself will continue to change. That's one you can rely on. It's sort of been true for quite a while, but it's just accelerating right now. So that's one. Another one that you have to rely on is that the way through it isn't always going to be by trying to find a way to make everything stabilize. It's by using mechanisms that allow you to operate in a stable way amid instability. We talked about last year composable business, and a lot of people, looked at that and said, "Yeah, I don't know what that really, means for me every day." But the reality is, it was the notion that the way you think, the way you architect, and the technologies you buy have to be tuned to the fact that change is a norm, and they handle it very well. The better the technology handles it, the less that human beings have to be responsible for handling. Then they can be left to think about how things should shift. So having a foundation, another metaphor I use is about working out. Right, the human body is very resilient. It's a machine, and it can be trained. And the more you exercise it, the better that it gets at that. Right, and so you have to get these muscles working for you, high metabolism, muscle memory on your side, and that's all about the way you think, the way you architect, the way you buy technology. And one last one that is important is a principle we can rely on is that the unexpected is something we need to actually go after. In other words, another part of our keynote is the idea of reaching beyond what you normally do, reaching beyond your normal expectations. If you can reach beyond and find a new way to do things that is completely different than the way you did it before, you may find that you just tapped into a way that's more attuned to this fast-paced world that we live in. And that's a key thing, because we always think we're going to take the processes we've always had and modify them to work in the new world. No, we have to find new processes that are more aligned with the new world, and then things get easier.
Okay, so I'm a leader. I'm listening to you, and I'm going, okay, I got to reach beyond, dig deep. I am going to do this. We're going to do a deep rethink. And I totally get why that makes sense, right? Don't do a superficial tweak. This is a moment where deep rethinks might make sense. But I am also deeply, totally, and completely exhausted and fatigued going, I can't even reach like today. How am I supposed to reach beyond? Is there a silver lining, or is this exciting work and that's why people are going to do it? Is there some kind of positive piece of advice that you can say, this is how you dig deep and reach beyond even when we're all really, really tired?
Well, there's an angle here, and I know you've done a presentation before about how do you handle all this change when you're so darn tired.
Freaking tired, it's
something.
called. So freaking tired. Yes, I was allowed to put
Yeah,
that
so
in the.
freaking tired. I love it. And truthfully, that's the way you feel, right? It's
Yes.
like you're never going to be able to get up and do anything again. There's a sort of a parallel to that, and it goes back to this notion of exercising and resilience and building that in there. When you're tired, you can be mentally tired, you can be physically tired, you can be spiritually tired, you can be tired in so many different ways, and you have to attack the ones that you can work on. And each one will build on the last, right? So when I talk about the metaphor of physical fitness, I'm talking about the idea that as you get into a routine, right, of fitness, you build a higher level of metabolism that begins to work to your advantage. It makes you less tired when you're doing this. You exercise the big muscle groups. You have to find the big things that you can change, because the big muscle groups, once they're activated, will raise your metabolism the fastest and the highest. So you focus on those big things, not trying to control every little thing that's got to change. And then lastly, you focus on the exercises that are going to give you the results that you want. Right. In other words, don't try to micromanage everything. Let people live in their own little ecosystems of efficiency. Let them, start to handle our problems. Hand off, delegate some of that work to others, and let them work autonomously, if you will. So when you do that, you're allowing yourself to say, look, I don't have to do everything. I don't have to be. I can be a little more tired. I'm also getting my metabolism up, which is going to make me have more energy, and therefore I will be less tired. And I'm focused. So when I use that energy, I use it to the best advantage that I can get. Those are things that are going to help you through all of this, no matter how tired you might be.
So I like the metaphor, the big muscle groups. I am, as a side effect, feeling deeply guilty about not working out this morning. So I'm going to go do that sometime today as a result of this metaphor. Tell me a little bit. So you're also the man behind Gartner Predicts and our big predictions. And I know that while we've all been focusing on COVID, it's not like technology advancements have taken a break and just sat back and not done anything. There's a lot of cool, funky stuff going on. So what are the big muscle groups or big rocks that you think viewers should be be paying attention to, just in general from a technology perspective, or anything that we can peek under the covers of the keynote and go, this is some of the stuff that's really got Gartner's attention in terms of technology trends and themes?
Well, it's always interesting because, at this time of year, we're right in the middle of everything, and we're right in the middle of trying to select our next round of top predictions. And some of the ideas that pop out of there are just very, very interesting. We look at these notions of how people are dealing with living in a world of all this rapid change. For instance, the question of privacy comes up all the time, right? And the thing that is interesting about it is we seldom ever talk about the opportunistic side of privacy violation. In other words, we're saying we have a prediction we're working on that will probably say something akin to, by a certain time frame, certain number of people are going to intentionally devalue their privacy information. They're going to intentionally make it less valuable to advertisers, marketers, to anyone who might want to use their privacy information for gain, and then monetize it to their own gain. So now
Wait,
I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to make money.
I don't get it. Walk me through
Oh,
that.
I'm
How
going to
does
make
that work?
money off the fact that you have my privacy data. You already probably have multiple email addresses that you use. So you use a specific email address when you make sure you don't want to get a lot of spam, or you can ignore the spam. That's a simplistic view of that. But what if you could actually have your privacy information be devalued to the point where the information that people gather from it is incorrect? Whereas the information they're trying to gather a lot of information anonymously, sometimes with your name, and they build on that. They look at that and they look for trends. They look for behavioral patterns. They look for buying patterns. If your information were made such that it looked like your buying patterns were very different than what they are, for instance, you don't buy anything, then they wouldn't be bugging you with all those spam messages. So we're talking
I
about the idea of
love
finding ways
this.
to do that. Yeah,
I love
if
this.
you can
Can we do a
go ahead.
toolkit on that and walk through consumers on how exactly to do that? I would be quite interested.
Yeah, once we get the prediction finished writing, we'll probably have something like that worked up. This is the thing: is behavior matters, right? People's behavior will be a big determinant of their future success. Essentially, because we've thought technology would make the biggest changes in the world, and it has for quite some time. But about 15 years ago, there was a big shift, and the thing that made the biggest changes were actually business models that changed the world, the way we actually interacted with business models. Now, they're technology-enabled business models, yes, but those business models changed the way we work. And what's coming next is behavioral models. The way people behave, what they choose to do, will either give them an advantage or put them at disadvantage. So those three things, that technology, business, and behavior, leads us to a world that's more human-centric, more people-centric. And when you're people-centric, the sky's the limit for what can be done.
Okay, so I'm totally putting you on the spot. We did not prep for this in the pre-work for this interview, but do you have an example of a kind of business model, behavioral shift, model technology shift? And the reason I'm asking for something more concrete is because when you say behavior models, I get freaked out and go, they're going to monitor everything about us. Oh my gosh, Internet of Behaviors. It's kind of freaky, and there's this dark underbelly to this whole thing. Am I off base, on base? What is this, right, wrong?
No, you're right on target. And we are living in a world where we are monitored all the time. Okay, I have people tell me, about conspiracy theories, like, oh, there's a Bluetooth chip in the virus, in the vaccine. Which is humorous for me
Oh,
as a
yeah.
technologist, because I'm like, if we want to monitor your behavior, we don't need to put a chip in you to do it. We already have mechanisms. So throw away your mobile phone first. If you don't want to be monitored or tracked, throw it away now. But remember that we have seen these changes work to our advantage. So the business model changes, for instance, we've had model changes about asset sharing. We're now saying, you don't always have to buy a new one. You can borrow one from someone else, where else, and you could do that at scale. That creates a fundamental new business model. Now, the old examples of the Ubers and so forth.
Yeah.
You have Yard Club with Caterpillar for tractors. They do this. You even have companies like Big Box that want to, share rental spaces for storage. So you can share anything now. That's a business model shift that's brought a lot of opportunity. Now, we know about the streaming opportunity. We talk about Netflix. That's the old example. Well, but today Everything's a stream. Think about it. When you get up and go to work, you start streaming your image, you start streaming your voice, you start streaming data. And if you're like me, those streams are continuous throughout the entire day. So the collaboration that we do at work is now a stream of
And this
information
is like your
flowing.
13-year-old, right? This is your 13-year-old
Uh,
continuously streaming all day, phone on conversation. Okay.
so the idea here, though, is people's behavior begins to either leverage those kinds of model changes, like the streaming model, and like my 13-year-old daughter, they create their own dynamic, and that dynamic, you start thinking, wait a minute, are an advertisers going to start thinking, how can we tap into those long-running streaming interactions with advertising material? They did it with movies by putting product placement inside of scenes. A Coca-Cola can placed strategically behind Tom
Yep.
Cruise's head was now an advertisement. Well, if you've got young people logging into a stream and staying connected all day as they do other things, how can you insert images or sounds or indicators in the conversation to lead them somewhere? Well, that kind of behavioral change will need the new channels for delivering product, delivering service, and so forth to people. So we got business model changes, and it's everywhere. Now you probably go to a virtual doctor's visit. You probably don't go into the doctor's office right now. Virtual
Yep.
visit, and then the data that we gather from wearing devices that, give your blood sugar, your heart rate, your number of steps, your respiration rate, your blood pressure, everything, it facilitates a whole new model of information sharing that changes the engagement with our healthcare professionals. I look at that and I say, okay, what does that do to my behavior? Well, it makes me more likely to exercise, in fact, because we all do one thing when we go to the doctor. Everybody does the same thing, and we all do it, is we lie to the doctor. Every last one of them.
I
Yep.
don't know what you could possibly mean by that statement. I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah, absolutely not. No, I know. But when you go to the doctor and she asks you, have you eaten well? Have you been exercising? Have you, stayed away from the candy or whatever? We lie. We just do. But the machines won't let us lie because they will actually send that information. We'll opt in for this. We have to opt in. We'll send that information to the doctor. The doctor will have our stream of data from us that they get all the time. And when we go in, she won't have to ask you if you've eaten well or if you've exercised. She'll say, I see that you haven't been getting enough steps in.
So
And then you have to figure out some other
the
way.
truth will out, and thus we will change to more honest behavior. I like this idea. Just your metaphor is going to make me work out, big muscle groups and all that. So we have business model changes, behavioral shifts, technology shifts. A lot of this coming up in the opening analyst keynote at Gartner IT Symposium Expo. Any final words of wisdom for our viewers before we wrap this up, Daryl?
Well, I think the one thing that I would want to add in there is always be on the lookout for the counter trend. The counter trend is going to actually probably give you an advantage, 30 to 40% of the time, and that seems high. But the reality is that when you look out and you say, okay, everybody's been sent home and nobody's going to want to go back to work, the counter trend is no, people may demand to go back to the office because being remote is painful. In so many ways. So look for the counter trend and make sure you're not trapped into just going one way. Give yourself the option because in the end, finding your where next is about being able to create something anywhere you need to, be able to connect with people and businesses and systems everywhere that they might be, and to reach beyond and find those new innovations that can actually change the way things are done. That's the way
Thank you.
that you get it there. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Daryl, for joining us today. Lots of pearls of wisdom to unpack. If you'd like to learn more about the topics we discussed during today's interview, please join us later this year for Gartner IT Symposium Expo. And you can find more information about Gartner IT Symposium Expo in the description on this post. I am Mesaglio. Thank you very much for watching Gartner Live.